Hello and welcome back for episode 13 of Veteran Instincts. This week we have myself playing against Jon Vicary, and I'm joined by returning after last week's absence, Lloyd.
Hello again.
And increasingly frequent contributor, Ben Barber.
Hello.
I am running a variation of the list I ran last time I was on the channel. 4 Horsemen, we're calling it. 4 hard-hitting imperial ships: Suntifer with Predator, Fifth Brother with passive sensors and home missiles, Pure Sabak with Predator, and there's change from last time is Major Rhymer with advanced proton torps and afterburners. And Jon is running a beefy rebel swarm, should we call it, with 4 bandit squadron Z95s, Lieutenant Blount, Zeb Aurelius, and a blue squadron scout U-wing with Leia Organa crew. And Jon's been trying to run as many ships as possible, I think, in the tournament. So I think he's been taking kind of swarmy stuff every round.
So my first instinct is, like, unlike some of the, like droid swarms or imperial swarms, this one doesn't have the mods, right? Focus is a focus, but like for these good swarms and whatever, they just have so many mods.
Yeah, so it lacks the sort of double mods with the Howl Runner reroll that you get with the Imperial squad, and it
all the extra dice that all the munitions of droids, right?
Yeah, the munitions, the Discord missiles, the calculate sharing, all of that kind of extra stuff.
2 of your ships are extremely defensible, right? Like all these green dice. So I'm seeing a future where he's going to struggle to damage Suntir and Fifth Brother.
Yeah, like you've still got a reasonable amount of bucking potential, and I think what you've traded is the potential. Like everyone's shot at a TIE fighter that just refuses to die, right? You trade that out here with 2 agility, but you put 4 health on it, half of which is shields on the Zeds.
Yep.
And so it's arguably lower variance. It's certainly harder to take one off the board with 1 or 2 shots. They have the potential still to be fairly tanky, but it's perhaps not a top level kind of swarm list or large number of ships. And then looking at the board, so we skipped through turn 0 and setup. If I had to guess, Paul, I would say that the 3 rocks are on the outside of the ones that Jon placed, and the 3 in the middle of the ones that you placed. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, so Jon started off with this large rock in my bottom right-hand corner. And I placed the large rock that's more towards the centre of the board. And then I was kind of creating a net with the smaller rocks then that were available to me. And I think... And yeah, so to sort of talk about what you're both talking about, it's definitely a less intimidating swarm to see across the table. I'd have been more worried about the matchup with either the TIE swarm or certainly with the droids. But nevertheless, it is a lot of health and a lot of guns. And I do not want to joust it. I don't want to engage the whole list at the same time. So my idea with the rocks was to create a kind of quite a tight net of rocks that he would have trouble bringing his swarm through, and then to try and bait him into it and to try and stay in my corner and force him to come to me. Now, looking back at turn 0, I think probably I went a bit too tight. I've left a lot of open space in the corner that Jon has set up in. And the issue for the Imperial ships is they're all quite quick, right? It's hard to get them to go really slowly. So my task of staying in this corner until Jon comes to me is slightly more tricky than it might be with ships that were able to go slower.
And for Jon, like with having no rock stopping, I mean, we've talked about this before, right? With the swarm, and like he can turn in pretty much wherever he wants, right? He's got all this space to turn. That doesn't discount the fact that it's really difficult once he does turn because there's all this stuff in the way, but he's just got so much space at the moment to decide where to turn.
Yeah, so his setup to get through those channels, even though channels are tight, he's got a lot of room to set up. Whereas if I had a rock sort of about where his Z95s are now, it makes the approach into this corner much more difficult. Yeah, so I think I probably could have done better. I had a plan for turn 0, and I don't think it was a bad plan, but I think I probably could have executed it a bit better.
And I think we tend to go into matches with an idea of looking at what your win conditions are. Now, in this match, obviously, Jon doesn't need to engage, and so he doesn't need to come through the rocks because he has such a huge final salvo in comparison to you. What are your thoughts on what you're looking at for an end game? I assume you're not looking at trying to kill everything on the table.
No, I think at the start of this is about sort of working out what he's going to do. So you can see in this opening turn, he's actually brought the Z95s out quite quickly. And I was hoping that meant he was going to be hyper aggressive and in fact like over aggressive and play into my hands and come into these rocks. Because to me there didn't seem to be much advantage over, of the 3 straight over the 1 straight. I suppose what it does do is if I get cute with Suntir and try and bring him towards Jon's list, then he catches me out and I don't have enough time to run away. But you're right. I think were Jon to K-turn up and down his board edge, that's a problem for me, and Jon's definitely up in the final salvo. Most of the time, to be honest, people don't do that, and although it might be the best strategy, I think a lot of people sort of see that as not fun in inverted commas. But I think, as the opponent, what I was trying to do was just give myself time to see whether that's what he was going to do. And if he does start doing that, then I need to time it so that on a turn where he has to K-turn, I engage and just plink, get half a Z95 or get a Z95. And if I can do that without putting my list in a dangerous spot, then all of a sudden the pressure's on Jon and he has to come to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Whereas his list has arguably greater damage potential because of the extra red dice, you've got the ability to score points much more easily.
Yeah.
And you can choose almost where and when these engagements happen. Absolutely.
And if I mean, to be clear, I'm talking about the sort of coating up and down the board edge. I actually, it's probably something I wouldn't myself find fun and therefore wouldn't do, but I would have absolutely no problem personally with my opponent doing it because I think it's a valid tactic. It's within the rules of the game, and you're playing to win.
I mean, when people complain about people do, I mean, you've seen complaints about that with certain lists at tournaments and whatnot, but it's like, well, why should the opponent do what is good for you,
Absolutely.
Like, oh, they're not playing the game that I need them to play.
Yeah. It does feel like that's often what it is, isn't it? It's not that there's a sort of an inherent problem with what they're doing. It's that they're not, that my opponent is not allowing me to win and have fun at the same time.
So yeah, I think Jon has kind of one of two ways of winning here, right? He needs to either kind of block you and catch one of your ships so that he can put a lot of damage into you while you were trying to escape, or he needs to get in a position where he doesn't give up a flank too easily so that when shots happen, you are trading shots. And so if he was to just K-turn up and down his board edge, what he's doing there, intentionally or not, is not giving up a flank, not giving up an edge of the board. Because if everything turns in here, he's now got the potential for Suntir to get around one side and the other ships to get around the other side, and then he has difficult decisions. Looking at Suntir here, we've spoken in the past quite a lot about always having options with Suntir, whether he wants to turn in or out, and obviously in this case you haven't. Is that just because of the number of ships and the amount of threat it poses to Suntir?
Well, I'm trying to. So on that first turn, you're right. I boosted away. I think at that point Suntir was too far away from the rest of my list to realistically want to turn in. What I've tried to do here is actually give myself that option, as you say. So I'm now sat at a position where next turn I could 2 hard or 3 hard inwards around this rock. I could go straight to come towards the rest of my list, or if I want to really hard disengage, I can turn away and get into that kind of bottom right-hand corner. So I am trying to do that. I'm just doing it kind of, maybe not from the absolute first turn.
The turn away actually is a really interesting move because on the one hand you're like, oh, that's the hardest disengage, but actually the turn away, you then are even more unpredictable the following turn, right? So say Suntir turns left here, you can either turn left again and be ready to come around to that top right flank, or turn to go with the others. Jon's come fast, but it's cool, right? Because it means that Suntir, you talked about giving up flanks, like Suntir can't even consider dancing around at the top for now.
Yeah, he's forcing Suntir towards the rest of my list, and as you say, Ben, I want to, in an ideal world, to kind of present threats from different directions. And that's the potential issue with the 5 straight here, is that my whole list is in the one place, and then if that's the case, I start to look like I'm going to end up jousting, which is absolutely not what I want to do. I'm not super unhappy though with how this has gone. I think the thing Jon has done with the 2-3 straights is that now, if he were to 2 hard downboard with that central kind of block of Z95s, he's running towards this large rock. So I'm feeling relatively happy with my bottom 3 guys, that they can turn up into this gap or maybe continue to kind of go slowly forward and keep their options open for next turn. With Suntir, I wasn't really ever considering the turn in, right? It's too high risk. If Jon one banks everything, Suntir sat on his own in front of all of his guns. So for me at this point, it's between the 5 straight forwards, Which, if I was to do that, I think I'd go really fast with everything else. So I was kind of thinking, if I 5-stroke Suntir forward and go very fast with everything else, then I can
try and get them around the corner.
I can get them around the corner, and then Suntir can kind of stay in this field of rocks as a kind of distraction. Or do I turn the guys in through the rocks and bring Suntir out to the left?
Because where we are at the moment, it's looking like Jon has the opportunity to turn down. As you said, that rock is a potential problem for him. But that is still bringing the fight to where originally you were looking at it happening.
Absolutely.
Now, it'll be interesting to see whether Jon is going to take that bait or whether he's going to try and stay out in the open space, which probably favours him in the grand scheme of things.
The other thing about that, you turn those Z95s in, they're really on their own, right? The rest of his list will be so far behind. And he K-turn, brilliant. I love it. I really like that.
So yeah, I had the exact same assessment as you in that I think I've decided to kind of turn in at this stage from my bottom 3 guys. And the reason for it was exactly that if he turns down, although it's a bit jousty, it's a joust into the area of the board I want him to come into. Yeah. And he's in a column, right? And I can engage 2 of his ships, maybe 4, but I certainly won't be engaged all 7. And with the firepower of my list, I'm fairly confident that I can take 1 off the board before it shoots. So that felt like kind of quite a good situation. The K-turn I wasn't expecting. And it obviously kind of keeps his options open somewhat. So again, just for the stream, there's the 1 stress token there, but that kind of applies to all 4 of those Z95s. Yeah. They're all stressed.
It's really good now because he's got his 2 ships covering. Like, if you had done the crazy move, which he never would have done, he's like, okay, but these guys are going to cover my K-turned Zs, which I really like.
Yeah, you're right. Because even now, Suntir can turn in, he's not getting shot by the Z95s, but he is getting shot by Zeb and the U-wing and probably Blount in a moment are all facing into that area of the board and threatening him. So the turn in, almost whatever Jon had done was never the right move with Suntir. I'm an R a bit here because obviously I've got options with Sabak, and because all of my bottom guys are 4s, I can kind of self bump a little bit to keep them slow, and that's what I've been doing with Sabak so far. The reason he's managed to not move very far is that he's been intentionally bumping into Reimer. So I have that option again. I think I've got the 1 bank dialed in, and I kind of decide though that probably the better thing is to get Sabak round the corner so that he is kind of facing directly upboard at the side of those Z95s, because they're not going to be able to hard turn back in that tightly.
Yeah.
And although he's got layer, they can do another red move, but they cannot do any actions. So I'm going to try and bring Sabak up in between the central large rock and the one to the right of it in the next couple of turns to kind of get into the side of the list.
I think it's interesting here that he didn't pop layer on this turn where he's K-turning. So he's kind of acknowledging there's not going to be an engagement this turn. Based on that, it's unlikely to be an engagement next turn. And so how far away is he from wanting to or needing to use layer again? Because Zeds don't have a great dial. I think they've got a 2 bank. Is there anything that's going to bring them towards where the rest of your list is? And clear stress. So what are your thoughts on using layer or not using layer in this turn?
I think he probably should have. I think it keeps his options much more open for the turn after this. If those Z95s weren't stressed, I would have to be really concerned about the whole list now turning down into these rocks. And whereas, I don't hate that, they're coming into the rocks, that's what I wanted them to do, they are all coming in together. And where my ships are now, it's slightly hard for them to sort of disengage from that. So I end up with the joust that I'm trying to avoid. The fact they're all stressed now, they can still do that. But if they do, they're much less scary without the focus tokens. And I'm expecting realistically that they're not going to be. Feels like he's not going to need layer in the next 2 or 3 turns.
Absolutely, yeah, that's my thought as well.
So I feel like he could have layered there, but leave those guys unstressed and give me much more to worry about this turn.
So you went the way with Suntir that I was hoping you might. Did you consider, instead of going downbound this rock, going all the way up?
No, I didn't. And actually, I think that probably would have been the better plan. So I'm guilty a bit there with Suntir of having made a plan of what to do with him when dials were down and not revisiting it once everything had moved. So not giving myself the benefit of that I6. So
I make that mistake all the time.
But yeah, I think there were 2 repositions there that were interesting. The Suntir one is one, right? Because it now telegraphs what you can and can't do next turn. You've taken away the option of being able to turn around and threaten getting behind the Zeds. But also the barrel roll from Sabak, you barrel rolled him left towards the rest of your list again. Now that sort of takes away any threat you had of going up and to the right and between, sort of almost towards where Suntir was at the start of this turn, and again threatening the back of the list that way. What was the rationale behind that barrel roll?
What I think I'm doing next turn is committing to the engagement. So the plan with Major Reimer is that I 3 hard him, afterburners if I need to, Fifth Brother kind of turning in as well, he can boost if he needs to. And the issue with where Sabak was that I thought with the ailerons I then couldn't move straight because I'd be on that rock. So it was to give myself space from that central rock. So it's not ideal, but I kind of barrel rolled sideways and back, and I was worried that if I one bank in and then go straight, I end up on that rock and in a bad place.
And it's worth mentioning because Reimer's not a ship we see very often, so he has advanced proton torpedoes, but because of his ability, he can fire them at range 2 and range 0. It's worth noting.
And range 0, yeah. Oh, he's wonderful. I love him. I love him to bits. Like he's perfectly built for what he's trying to do in this list. So the afterburners obviously makes him unpredictable. The ability is easily forgotten, and people generally remember the range 0 bit, but I've had a couple of people forget that he can also increase the range band by 1.
Range 2 advanced proton is terrifying.
Yeah, and also the fact that his linked action is a barrel roll into the target lock.
Yeah,
means that your ability to block and have the target lock to then shoot the thing you've blocked is immense. So I love this rhyme build to bits, and in this list it works really well.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because he is incredible in this list, but it's probably, in a vacuum, he's definitely the 4th best ship in your list.
I think it's between him and Sabak. I think if I was able to fly Sinterfell would be incredible. Fifth Brother is just amazing and actually pretty easy to fly. And Reimer and Sabak are kind of just a tier below that, I think. But in combination with those other 2 ships, present a real issue. Just to flick back, because I think it was worth talking about. Yeah, Suntir, I kind of decided I was turning him away. And part of the decision to turn him away, I didn't want him out of the fight too long. But I thought it was okay because I thought, oh, it's fine. I'll boost. I can hard turn and boost again next turn. He's only going to be 1 turn behind the rest of my guys at most. But you're right. I should have stopped. I should have thought, you know what, another hard turn left, no boost, and another hard turn left, and I'm in behind the list, and it all looks good. So that was definitely an area for improvement, and just sort of like we advocate all the time, right? I should follow my own advice, just to stop for a moment before you do anything and think if there's a better option.
Yeah, it's so easy for us to look at it like, oh my god, why are you doing this? But it's like when you're playing, like I literally made a mistake in my last game that cost me, and if I'd have just taken like 10 seconds to think about it, I'd be like, no, that's stupid, don't do that.
As we did this as well, so John has clearly this turn declined that kind of engagement into the rocks, which I think is probably the right idea. I don't necessarily love the way he's chosen to not engage you. Z95 dial is a real problem, right? It's not good at clearing stress. He's kept all of his stress this turn. He hasn't used layer again on the Ewing, which I think is fine either way, because the Ewing dial is pretty good at clearing stress from where it is. But he's now got 5/7 of his list stressed. And the Zeds don't have a great way of clearing it and being involved again. So it feels like all of those are coming into the engagement, which looks down like it might be, the proper engagement next turn, but some dice this turn with no mods.
Yeah, and I think John himself sees this as a kind of a major error he made at the start of the game. I don't mind the Z95s heading back straight into their corner. I don't mind where the Ewing is either. The 2 things that sort of seem a little bit odd are the fact he didn't clear the stress that turn. So although they can K-turn again because of layer next turn, again, they're going to be stressed. They're going to have their options limited for the turn after that. And also, I think Zeb and Blount are like a turn ahead of the rest of John's list. They look at the moment like they're going to have to do one of 2 things. They're either going to have to commit into an engagement on their own, which is really bad, or they're going to have to hard turn to the right or to the left to try and delay. And if they do, hard turn to the left, they can't engage. The rocks are going to be in the way. They're not going to be in a good spot. On a hard turn to the right is possibly even worse because then you're facing the rest of your list getting in its way and not being involved in that first turn of combat. So, like, the idea is sound. And John is actually doing a really nice job at this point of doing the opposite of what I want to do, right? Of drawing me out into the open. But the sort of 2 slight kind of imperfections in how he's achieved it are the fact that those Z95s are all still stressed and the fact that Zeb and Blount are kind of a turn ahead. And probably the way to fix that, if we wound it back, was last turn when they turned in, if they'd continued like 1 straight along the top board edge and turned in this turn, So they'd be facing the same direction, but 2 or 3 base lengths back up towards the top edge of the board. I think that would be a much nicer position. It would have also meant the 3 straight would have been okay, because I think the reason behind the 4 straight was to not block them.
Yes, absolutely. It felt like his entire sort of thought process this turn is, I need to make sure that Zeb and Blount get actions, and so I just need to clear the Zeds out of the way. And I think that's come with double cost, right? Like actually bumping Zeb and Blount back probably would have been better.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in a list here that for Jon wants to perhaps get in and block with some of those Zeds, what he's now got is, with Zeb leading the charge, he's got what is ultimately his biggest gun, having a choice of probably being a lead blocker, which is not really the position you wanted.
So I've now kind of seen a weakness, basically. The game plan has changed slightly, and although in an ideal world I would have wanted to engage in the rocks, I don't think I can pass up this opportunity where Jon has got his ship slightly out of position. And so everything turns in, and everything not only turns in, which obviously dialed in before he did moves, but commits further in. So Suntir does the boost around the corner, pure barrel rolls to hopefully be able to go straight around that central rock, although it's very close. And I'm kind of in position now, I think, to pounce next turn, because Zeb and Blount don't have a good way of not being in range at the end of the next movement phase.
Yeah, so it feels like Zeb is about to take a lot of fire.
Let me ask about Major Rhymer for next turn, because my instinct is always like, oh, this is such a good opportunity to use my afterburners. And my first instinct with Major is like, if you did a 3-bank left and then boost with the afterburners, was that in your mind, or is that just me looking at things like too fancy?
I definitely used the afterburners on Rhymer offensively. It's to get him in range. It's to get him closer than the opponent expects him to be. Here, however, I think he's probably not going to need to be that close. The range 2 is just as good as the range 1.
Right.
The problem with the 3-bank and then boost is that you maybe give the U-wing shots when you don't need to.
Yeah.
The issue with the conservative move is that obviously he's aiming at this rock, and I kind of quite like him not to be the turn after this. Fifth brother, likewise, he can just bank in. My thought with Suntir was kind of that there's no advantage of doing anything other than 2 banking, as long as Pure Spac's out of the way, because it gets him a shot this turn, and it gives him the ability to kind of turn right if he needs to kind of get out of the engagement again, rather than continuing to plough in the turn after.
Boost from Suntir I didn't like at the time, and I'm not sure I still love it. Like, I think I still would be trying to slow my list down if I was in your situation coming into this engage. Like, you were talking about going straight with Sabak and getting past the rock, but I like something like a 1-bank right and a 1-turn left.
Yeah.
Just to kind of open your arc up, keep yourself out of range of everything. If Suntir hadn't boosted last turn, he can just roll in, get into a position where next turn he can take shots, because you don't need a lot of guns on Zeb necessarily to kill him. But that means, again, next turn, he then has to deal with the rock rather than you.
Yeah, I think that's very valid. I was thinking about the 1-bank, 1 hard in with Sabak, and I am worried that it is on that small rock. I may well be wrong, but spoiler alert, I don't go for it because the risk is too high.
Yeah, absolutely. If he's one of your bigger guns, rocking him and going into the engage is just not worth it.
Absolutely. Whether I take a damage or not, just not having that shot is a way I start to lose from a winning position. So, although I'm aware that if Sabak goes effectively 3 straight forward, he's going to be taking a bit more fire than I wanted. I think it's the lesser of 2 evils. So now we see sort of the real truth of what we were saying last turn, right? So Jon's U-wing and his block of 4 Z95s are in a really lovely position, right? They've created this kind of amphitheatre of death for me to fly nicely into. And had Blount and Zeb been on the top board edge facing inboard, they'd have been part of that. And I would have been forced to turn away again the next turn. And I might not have been able to manage it. And if I did, I'm then facing away from his list, and he can come through the rocks, taking his time without any kind of incoming fire. But the fact that Zeb and Blount are there, a turn too early, gives me the opportunity to have a better engagement this turn and then worry about next turn.
Absolutely. And it's something to think of when you have lower initiative ships, right? So for Jon here, there's a real chance one of his ships dies before it fires. It's not impossible, though it's unlikely that both of these ships die before they fire. I don't expect that to happen at all, but it's something to consider. Right? You need to be bringing your guns in together because you're going to take losses in that initial engage, and you need to make sure that you're trading for something rather than just giving up damage.
Yeah, and it's, Zeb and Blount firing at pure Sabak is scary, but I think here with the barrel roll, I thought I was safer than that, but I get range 2 by about a millimetre, which is good. But obviously the barrel roll means that I'm not facing that rock for next turn. I've got more options next turn.
How nervous are you about firing an advanced proton torpedo with single mod?
You just have to in this list.
I mean, I can see that.
It's not ideal. If there were a way to get double mods without sort of sacrificing too much, that would definitely be better. But it's 5 dice with a reroll, and one of the things that Lloyd and I have been learning from the channel is that kind of a lot of the good players, I think do trust their dice a bit more than we do, and actually the majority of games I've played so far, he gets 3 or 4 hits, and that's okay. You know, if he gets 2, you're in trouble. If he gets 5, you probably win the game there and then against a lot of targets.
I mean, as you said, it's 5 dice with the reroll. Like that, you dream of that all day, right?
Yeah, exactly right. So I mean, I think the 5 dice makes you're not expecting 5 hits. You know, you've got that. You know, you've got 2 extra dice instead of a focus. Basically, it's kind of a pseudo double modded 3 dice attack. So you're expecting 3. It might spike to 4.
Yeah, you're averaging 3.7.
Oh,
so you've got to fancy those odds.
And there's Sabak 80 running forwards, and Sabak doesn't have a choice. It's not, as I say, he's not in an ideal situation. He's sort of a little bit further forward than the rest of the list than he needs to be. But you've got 5th and Major Reimer with target locks on Zeb, and I'm hoping that I can shoot my way out of trouble and that Zeb won't be there when it comes time to shoot at Sabak.
So in this, 2 things firstly. So obviously we spoke about Reimer barrel rolling to take the lock, so the shot. Actually, the obstruction you weren't too concerned about, right? But it's to get more options for Reimer next turn. Yeah. That does stress him, and his dial's not great, but I suppose that's worth the trade-off. Is that right?
Yeah, and it does stress him, and I've forgotten to put that stress down, which becomes relevant in a minute. But he is stressed. I just don't know it.
Fair enough. And then the next part of that is, what's your order of priority for shooting here? I assume Sabak wants to shoot last because he has choice of targets, and also you want more information for him firing, for spending his focus or not. But what's the decision points for the other 2? Is one firing first, or?
Well, I think the first decision is Suntir here, and the safest play in terms of killing Zeb is to shoot Zeb. Both shots are obstructed, so it's range 2 versus range 3. So he's going to roll less agility than Blount. But my decision is that I think that that's more than I need, and I think I can afford Suntir to shoot Blount. Mm-hmm. And the advantage of Suntir shooting Blount is what I'm trying to do is get him to spend his focus. Yeah. Then he's much less dangerous on attack, and I get a really nice roll. I spend my focus. I get 3 hits. I'm Blount a bit unlucky with the 4 dice to only get an evade and a focus, and he decides to spend the focus. And so I get a bonus damage into Blount there, and I get what I really wanted, which is him spending his focus. The reason that's so important is that Blount is I4, like the rest of my list. So at the point where Blount shoots at Sabak, even if I've killed Zeb, he's still there, he's still at range 1, and Blount gets his extra dice. So I didn't want pure Sabak taking that 3 dice gun.
And I think that's absolutely right. And even the spending of Suntir's focus is not something that normally we would be recommending. But in this situation, you know that it's Sabak he's shooting at. Sabak is in such a better target of opportunity for Jon that there's almost no reason for him to shoot at Suntir. And even if he does, that's almost better. Because Sabak is such a big hitter in this game, and moving at I4 is still an ace in this list.
Yeah, and we see exactly that. So Blount is now shooting with his bonus dice and rolled 2 focus and a hit. Having just spent his focus, that's 1. And then luckily my Sabak rolls double evade, and I get the benefit of that play, right? I get the benefit of making spend the focus, which is that Sabak hasn't taken any damage.
Just looking back and Jon's decision to spend the focus, do you think it would have been super greedy to keep the focus? Okay, you're going to lose 2 shields, and then he still has to think about Blount, right? Because you don't really have to worry about Blount now. I mean,
yeah, no, I think that would have been right. I think you could have kept the focus for that 1 damage and had more threat on Sabak. Because I think if I trade Zeb for Sabak here, or Zeb for even half of Sabak, actually, that is not bad at all for Jon. So Major Reimer's rolled his advanced proton top here. He got 3 hits and a crit, re-rolled into a focus, but as we say, ended up with those 4, so 2 hits, 2 crits. and Zeb rolling the 1 evade. So because of Zeb's ability, blocks the evade takes away the first crit, the second crit goes onto shields, and then he takes 2 damage. So he's down to 1 hull already. And because he's down to 1 hull, he needs to let Fifth Brother shoot the home missiles because he obviously can't take the auto damage. So the next shot that's going to be coming up is Fifth Brother. Bit suboptimal, has to spend the target lock. And then I decide to spend both force here rather than be greedy. He's got the obstruction, he's got 3 dice, and it seems too greedy to try and keep a force on Fifth Brother here. So I spend both to guarantee the kill.
No, absolutely. I think that makes perfect sense again. Right? And in terms of the order in which you shot those again, I think shooting Reimer first is the right idea. Because then again, Fifth can make that decision on whether he's spending force or whether, in fact, he's firing a homing missile at all with more information.
As a bonus, I've got Pure Sabak, who's now able to shoot range 2 into blank and rolls 4 hits, naturally, which is nice. And blanks out. And so I'm pretty happy with that. As an opening engagement, I've taken no damage and I've killed his 2 named ships.
Next turn, you have nowhere to go but face his entire list, though. So
yes, yeah, and that's an interesting point, right? So I feel like I was right to take that opportunity to have the engagement, and I think that it has gone as well as it possibly could have done. I think that the lucky thing was killing blank. That was not necessarily guaranteed to happen, but I think Zeb was always going to die. And you're right. Now I don't have an awful lot of options. I have a better joust because it's 4 hard-hitting named ships into 5 generics that would be single modded. So it's definitely better than jousting list at the start, but it's still not ideal, and it's certainly not ideal because now Reimer has a 2 dice gun, not a 5 dice gun. So what are you guys thinking in terms of my positioning here and what Jon does and what I do?
So if you joust into this entire list, I think at this stage it's actually a pretty even joust, but there's no reason for you to take it. So I would actually be looking at the options of disengaging. So Jon has still got the problem of all of his ships being stressed and they're slightly limited dials. The Zed's more so. Just kind of thinking aloud. So if Sabak 1 banks to the right and then 3 banks left, he has the chance to get around and behind Jon's entire list within the next turn or 2. Soontir can just 2 turn to the right and bug out of this. Now it does leave Reimer slightly exposed. The Zeds don't have a great dial again, so you could just sort of 3 bank and afterburner away. I think that's probably a bit optimistic and again stressed, right? But the afterburners would still allow you to boost. And it leaves Fifth a little bit exposed. But Fifth could 1 bank, take an evade, have force evade, and just try and tank this turn while Sabak and Soontir flank. So that's kind of my initial thoughts on it. And so the thing I always tell people off for when they're playing games is making decisions without knowing dials. So obviously Reimer does have a 3 turn, so he could just 3 turn left afterburner away, at which point he almost certainly isn't getting shot. So then you've disengaged with just about everything, with Fifth maybe taking 1 shot from a Zed, assuming they're 2 banking down to try and clear stress this turn.
Yeah, and that's my assumption. I think Jon doesn't have many other options because of that stress. And again, going back to 2 turns ago, the force straight and keeping the stress, I think he has to 2 bank. He can't just head straight because Fifth and Major get into the side, and Pure Sabak is difficult to pin down because of those ailerons. And because of that, I come up with a very similar plan to you. I dial in the 3 bank with Pure Sabak to his left. I'm not confident that the aileron right and then 3 bank left fits, although now looking at it, yeah, maybe it does. But my thought was I can either double down and I'm 1 bank left and then 3 bank left, and if he's hard turned and done something unexpected, then I'm in the side. Worst case scenario, I sort of smash into the front one and get a 5 dice shot into a rear one. But what I'm hoping for is that with that 2 bank, which we see coming in here, that Pure Sabak can go 1 straight forward and then 3 bank round the side of the list and kind of be in a decent position for next turn.
It does leave you jousting into a Ewing a little bit, but
it does. But a 1-to-1 trade, I think I'm
absolutely
far enough ahead in the game that's okay. Reimer, yeah, I agree entirely. So my plan with Reimer is the 3 hard left, the afterburners boost to get out of arcs, and then because I don't think he's stressed, then to reload, which is like the icing on the cake. But at this point, I have a quick look at our 186th chat, and Phil, who's watching the game, has messaged me to say he should be stressed. So, and I'm lucky really because of the afterburners, you being able to do that when you're stressed. I can still get into a nice position. I just don't get the reload. And I think it probably was the best play anyway, even knowing I'm stressed. So what I do this turn, which is a sort of a theme of the rest of the game to a certain extent, is that I think I dial the right moves in with 3 ships and then ruin it all with the 4th. And I think that's something that clearly I need to learn. But it's a really easy thing to do. And so Reimer has got out of trouble here. As we say, he's got his Afterburners boost. Pure Sabak is coming in. Arguably, I should have dialed in the straight 3 with Pure Sabak. I think it gave me more options, but I wasn't certain it was fast enough to get me out. I think if he'd had a 4 or a 5, I'd have been dialing that in and heading towards the top of the board. But I wasn't certain that the 3 was enough. So Pure Sabak is going to be trading far with this U-wing, but I think that's all he's going to be trading far with. Again, 5 dice into 4, single mods both sides, not terrible. But this is the move that I think was bad. And I've 2-banked 5th here, and honestly, I couldn't tell you why. As you rightly say, this is not a turn for homing missiles. Without the threat of the added crit, there's no way I spend my second homing missile doing 1 damage to a Z95. And there's no need for him to be there. Having decided that with the rest of my list, I'm dodging arcs and I'm trying to take as little fire as possible, why then roll the 4th ship into position to be shot by everything? And I've given Jon back the 4 shots that I just took away by arc dodging with Major Reimer. I could have turned away and gone towards where Suntir was. I could have hard turned in between these 2 rocks, boosted, been out of 2 arcs, been at range. Even here, if I'd been thinking, I could have barreled to the left, which I think gets me out of 2 arcs.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm surprised you didn't.
And sits me there with the linking into the focus. So just a complete failure of thought there with 5th, and undoing all the good work because everyone else is in a beautiful position. Suntir can threaten coming back in next turn. Sabak, he's just going to cross his fingers a little bit, but that's what Sabak is like. And Reimer is round the back of the list with ample time to reload and come back in. And 5th brother has ruined it all.
Damn you. So one thing I really like is to look at things with like broad strokes, bigger picture things. So we started the game talking about Jon not wanting to come in the rocks. He's done a really good job of that, right? Like he's committed to, I'm not going in those rocks. And like there were mistakes that have cost him, but just generally looking at it as a game plan. And if you look at what you just talked about this turn, you're like, this turn is about not getting... it's about like a safety turn, right? So you look at everyone's players, like your move gets safe. Like you can sort of look at it as like broad strategy and then apply that to each ship. And it's like you didn't with 5th.
Yeah. And it starts to colour my decisions with everything else because here, Sabak, where he is, had the option to barrel out to the right and take no shots, right? And the reason he didn't do that was because if he had, then all 5 ships are shooting at 5th brother. And I make the decision that dividing fire or tempting Jon into fire is now the best option. And I double down on that by spending the focus for the 2 additional hits. And I get a big swing into the U-wing and it goes down to 4 health, having taken a hull breach. So I get the reward, I get half the U-wing. But I didn't need to be taking any of this risk. I could have been looking at this turn, taking no shots with my 4 ships in 4 different parts of the board and Jon not possibly being able to cover all of them next turn.
No, completely. And just as we come to this 5th brother's shot, so ordinarily you'd be shooting at the closest set because you can strip a token. Now there's a hull breach on the U-wing. Are you pondering that shot? Yes,
I'm not expecting to do anything at this point. I think the thing that turns me away from that slightly is that he's got 3 agility. And so I go for one of the 2 agility ships and I actually decide to fire at number 3, who's just at range 2. And the reason I do that rather than number 1, who's the furthest forward, is that I think I've got a better chance of shooting him again next turn. And I get super lucky. He rolled the focus evade, kept his focus for attack, only taking 1, not halved. And then 5th has to base this volley.
Oh, hello. Yeah, I would definitely have done what Jon did and kept my focus.
So not a good start. Gets the 2 hits from the back guy at range 3. And I blank out entirely, spend the evade to take 1 shield, and start to feel a bit sorry for myself. And these guys are all range 2.
Oh, look at that. That's the Reimer shot.
And so another 2 hits, I think. This time I get the focus evade, so I get average. spend my force to take nothing. But I'm 2 shots out of 5 down. I'm already a shield down, and I've now got no tokens.
And again, worth noting, Jon is doing this in the right order. Right? He's leaving the Ewing till last because the Ewing has choices of shots.
Yeah.
Those small decisions really add up, right? Like, let alone just putting your ships in the right place or whatever, but like the order you shoot stuff in, I think can be something that isn't talked about enough, maybe.
So we missed a shot in the middle there where I took another shield, and that final shot I've evaded. And so the Ewing now has a choice. I got a range 1 focused shot into Sabak, or a range 3 shot into Fifth Brother.
This is interesting. In this situation, I would take the shot into Sabak because Sabak has 2 dice. You have the extra red. He has no tokens as well. It turns off his ability. But also, next turn, Fifth Brother doesn't have a lot of places he can go to.
Yeah, and that's what Jon decides. He decides that 4 versus 2 is better than 3 versus 4.
Which, of course, it
that's
is.
not a very complicated decision.
But it's right, isn't it? That although you kind of sit here and think, oh, Fifth Brother can be a really tanky ship, and you maybe need to take the opportunity while he's got no tokens, but actually, halving Sabak is worth a similar amount of points and turns off Sabak's gun, and it's probably better from a game point of view. And that's exactly what he does. He gets slightly unlucky to only get the 2 hits, but then I get focus plank, and Sabak gets halved, gives up half points, and is no longer a 4 dice gun.
As we said, now Leia has, I believe, 2 charges because he K-turned last turn and then cleared it this turn. So K-turns, certainly white K-turns, are not available this turn.
Yeah, and I double-checked that about 3 times before starting to plan.
So the interesting thing next turn, there's no threat of the homing missile, really. Seems, you'd now back down to 1 force. Major Rhymer still hasn't reloaded. So just like, I'm thinking more from Jon's side, like, okay, you turn towards Suntir, but Suntir is gonna run away. Like, it's not easy for him to get a decent shot now. It's like, what does he chase after?
So Lloyd, what do you think from Jon's point of view?
Fifth is the one you can get shots onto, right? So in terms of what Fifth can do on his dial, so he has a 5 forward, and that's certainly something you need to be accounting for. His 1 turn left is completely gone by that rock. That takes away his 2 turn, and I mean his 3 turn doesn't feel great from there either. So he either has to turn in and just trade fire, which is unlikely, he probably doesn't want to do, or try and bug out. Now, obviously, he has a 3 turn right to consider as well, but you can block basically everything on the right-hand side of his dial with your ships. So I would be looking at trying to bring pink across to kind of block a 5 forward, and then everything else covering in to kind of block everything back to his original position. So yellow is going to end up ultimately with the block, and you block him all the way back, and the Ewing comes in to close down everything on the right-hand side of his dial. Because what you don't want to do is block with your end ship, so that he jumps 3 or 4 of your ships, and then bumps into the last to end up with no shots on him. So it's a tricky one. And again, Zeds, as you said, aren't hugely maneuverable. So the trick for Jon here is to try and get in a position where he can get blocks. He gets those blocks all the way back to the front of the ship, and the ships that are shooting have mods.
So if you, just in a crudest way, if you just one banked right with all of them, would that do what you're talking about, or is it a bit more complicated than that? The one back right with all of them doesn't clear the 5 forward, right? So pink's got to maybe barrel roll or something, but yeah.
I think, it's difficult, right? Because pink wants to probably 2 turn, but a 2 turn then takes his arc out of the fight.
But doesn't leave him in a bad spot for next turn. He's got the K turn next turn to kind of face back around. Whereas the bank down actually might leave him in a weirder place for the subsequent turn.
But this is the turn to try and put damage into 5th, right? If you block 5th, he has a calculator, essentially.
So I'm sort of a bit annoyed with myself. Interestingly, and this is not to excuse my last turn's move with Fifth Brother, which was wrong. It should have been the 1 bank, or I should have barrel rolled. But I stuck the dice into the X-Wing dice calculator. And I say this not to excuse myself, but more just to highlight what a ridiculous ship the TIE Advanced Prototype is. The expected damage from those Z95s into Fifth Brother is 0.7, given the tokens I had at the start. So I have actually been incredibly unlucky to take 2 shields.
You've taken 1 damage more than you should have, right?
But that's insane, right? Like, because I came out of it feeling lucky to be alive, right? And lucky that I hadn't lost 5th and got half of Sabak. And so it shows actually, had I done the 1 bank and taken the evade, I could quite happily have traded shots with 2 or 3 of these guys and fully expected to take no damage.
Yeah, and what we've seen here is 2 turns of ships coming in slightly faster than they should have. The difference being your list has huge damage output, and John's at this stage doesn't, right? Because he's lost 2 of his 3 biggest guns.
I'm annoyed with myself because I've let Jon back into the game massively, both from a points point of view, where he's only about sort of 40 points down, and from a position point of view. And I decide that I need to gamble on where he's going. And I think that the 5-stroke with 5th is the obvious runaway move. So I think he's going to K-turn. I was worried about Suntir, and I was feeling that Suntir should run away. But I think that Sabak and 5th in the position they're in are too tempting and are too hard to turn down. So I gamble that Jon isn't going to 1 bank and 2 bank everything towards my side of the board to catch Suntir. And I think I probably can turn Suntir in here. So that's my kind of thought process for Suntir.
It feels like medium risk, high reward.
Yeah, right. So it is a gamble. It could go wrong. But actually, if it goes wrong, then the benefit is that the rest of my list is safe. And they're all now behind Jon's list. He's facing towards those 2 small rocks. And actually, even if Suntir were to die, I think positionally I'm in a good enough spot that I can probably still win. And if Jon does anything other than go towards Suntir, then obviously having Suntir coming in on the flank is good.
So I would be inclined to spend another turn disengaging this turn because Reimer, because of the stress, still isn't reloading this turn. Mm-hmm. So I would have been inclined to do something. I mean, Sabak probably sleeps this turn because there's not a huge amount Jon can do to threaten it particularly. Mm-hmm. And Sabak's value has gone way down now, right? He's now a 3-die gun.
Yeah.
I would be inclined to kind of just bank Reimer around reload, push into kind of almost further into the corner, just almost like a 2 straight or something, and just spend another turn kind of looking at where he's going until he has fewer options. And then you can bring all your guns back in again. There's no point bringing 1 gun in and 3 away, as we discovered last time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't do that this time. I think my worry with that is that I'm not sure about how I get 5th out of trouble. And what I don't want is a turn of 3 ships repositioning while Jon kills 5th.
Yeah.
And then a re-engagement. So I looked at the sloop with Sabak. I was worried that there was a lack of flexibility. So I'm keeping in mind that the U-wing can stop. So I'm thinking the U-wing probably stops and rotates towards where Major Reimer is at the moment. And if that happens, then I go straight and sloop. That's okay. My concern was if, as we start to see, we see some turns to the left from the Z95s, I didn't know where that sloop was going to end me up. And I worried I'd get too close to the board edge. If I was to aileron to my right, I was worried that the sloop then doesn't fit and I sloop off the board. So I've dialed in the far more aggressive hard turn, thinking that if the U-wing stays still, I can hard turn round the back of it and maybe even clip the back corner of it to get another shot into the already damaged U-wing. And with Reimer, I've just dialed in the 2 bank, keep 2 banks away. He's always going to be at range and he reloads to be able to come back around with his advanced proton torp.
I was just thinking that I quite liked Jon's moves right up until the U-wing moved.
I think he's tried to cover too many things.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree.
What he does do here, which is very wise, and I think I would have forgotten about, is he uses his action to turn off that hull breach, which is huge because at this point, with the potential for Suntir to turn in, if Suntir gets a range 1 shot at him with a hull breach, you're looking at a dead U-wing. So yeah, Reimer's coming round, taking a couple of shots, but again, because all game the timing of Leia has been slightly off. We've got stressed Z95s, and I think I can afford here with a 6th health Reimer to take the risk.
Yeah, absolutely. Like no one would describe a TIE bomber as tanky, but it does have 6 health, right? So it takes a little bit of time to bring it down, and 2 K-turning Z95s at what looks to be range 3 are probably not going to do that in 1 round for sure. So you give yourself a very high chance of getting another advanced proton torp off.
I've got options with Sabak, as I say. I've dialed in the 1 hard. I can bank away and 1 hard down the board edge, which is probably more sensible. But what I decide to do is choose violence and bank in and hard turn. I get the Predator, and I think that's why I did it. Was I then get quite a good shot into this second Z95. But I think that the turn away was probably more sensible again because I would have left Jon with 4 shots into everything. And then I was really pleased with my decision with 5th, and I gambled hard on the fact that Jon would do something like this. Basically, my thought process was that he was not going to expect 5th Brother to slowly roll towards where his ships were, given the state that he was in. And I kind of gambled hard on that, and it's paid off, and actually 5th Brother is out of all arcs. And although he doesn't have a great shot, he's got the range 1, and I was pretty happy with that. But again, as with last turn, I've done a pretty nice job with Major, pretty nice job with Suntir and 5th, and I've put Sabak taking 4 dice for no reason. You know, he didn't need to. If he banks the other way in hard turns, I think he's taking 1 unmodded shot at range 3 with a focus token.
And where we said as well about Jon is trying to do too many things, worrying a little bit about giving up too many positions, and ending up kind of just having a lot of mediocre shots into stuff that probably isn't going to take very much damage, with the exception of Sabak, who's on fire.
Yeah, and so Suntir gets hit crit with his reroll, not having to spend focus, and a nice double evade there from the U-wing, which I'm sad about. And that's a huge double evade, right? Because it means that had he not done that, then next turn the U-wing dies. But actually now it's still another two turns of fire before it does. I think I take the Sabak shot here into the Z95 that I've got Predator on.
Interesting you didn't shoot 5th first just to try and strip a token.
Yeah, I mean, stripping tokens, it doesn't matter the order, right? Like, they're both going to roll 3 dice. You know, I suppose with a reroll, he's slightly more likely to get a crit. But it doesn't hugely sort of make a difference in terms of the order. What I could have thought about doing, I think, is that actually probably not having a reroll but shooting a ship that doesn't have a defensive token is probably mathematically better. So I think I probably should have been shooting BSB4 here, who is also at range 1 of 5th Brother, and then I get 2 shots into an unmodded, especially seen as that Z95 I've just shot didn't have an attack. So stripping the token is of no value. But as it was, I managed to clink A damage through. So pure Sabak getting a decent attack roll there, but actually good evades and spending the focus to take no damage on the Z95. 5th Brother then follows up because he's shooting into a tokenless ship, spends force to get hit crit, which the Z95 eats and gets halved. So from a tricky turn, I'm actually looking in a decent position here, and as long as pure Sabak can weather this fire and nothing crazy happens to Suntir, this is looking like a turn that sort of edged me slightly further ahead. The U-wing has a range 2 shot. Suntir's kept his tokens, and so his expected to get 3 evades here just gets the 2, which is just enough to shrug off those 2 hits coming in from the U-wing. And then choice of targets here, but you feel that you've got to be shooting at pure Sabak. Reimer's facing away, hasn't taken any damage yet.
Yeah, I've got a chance to take a gun off the table, right? So at this point, even though it has mods, this kind of has to be the shot you take, I feel. And from here, of course, if Sabak does survive, which feels like a big if, he's now in a really good position to chase after the red Z95 that just got halved and kill it next turn. Like that Z has almost nowhere it can go that Sabak can't get to easily.
The first Z95 rolled double crits, but Sabak rolled double evades. That was a bit of a heart-in-mouth moment. I thought that had gone wrong at that point. And then the second Z95 just rolls the 1 hit. I'm sitting there with my focus token, and I think I rolled double evades again. So I think Sabak is 6 out of 6 for evades. No, he didn't roll maximum evades when he took the shot from the U-wing, but in the first engagement and in that engagement, he has rolled 6 evades out of 6. So he's doing good for what is generally not a particularly survivable ship.
So now, going into this position, presumably you love where you are with just about everything, right? You've got almost complete free range of targets.
Yeah, and we're coming up towards the hour here, so we're running out of turns. I'm a decent chunk up on points. I'm about 50 points ahead. Still a little bit precarious because I've got 2 ships that only require 2 damage to die, and that would even things up. But I've got Z95s pointing in a variety of different directions. I've got Major Reimer reloaded, ready to come back in this turn. And I've got a U-wing that's slightly out of the fight, although because of its ability to sort of rotate on the spot, does have some options.
And this time we have layer up again.
Yeah. But again, that kind of
too late, right?
timing issue with the stress Z95s, they're going to need to clear stress. But it does give options to the U-wing and to the other 2 Z95s, certainly. So what's you thinking here, Ben, from John's point of view? What's your kind of target priority? What are you trying to achieve?
That's really tricky, right? You're like, okay, I want to take out Sabak or Fifth Brother because they're the most likely to die. So how do you get that? Like you talked about, Red's option seems like, okay, cool, if I can K-turn here, that's fine, but is he going to live long enough to do much? The stressed ones feel like blocking Sabak doesn't get me anything, so I'm not really concerned about that. I don't feel like I've got any really exciting options, to be honest. This is what happens when you split low attack guns, right? I think you could kind of go all in on Reimer, actually. That seems like the most likely. Like, how can you get all your guns pointed? You could get all in on Reimer, but it doesn't feel like a great option. You know, like the Ewing can turn around, the yellow can turn around left, the stressed ones can go in, and Reimer's most likely he's like got the urge to use his torpedo. That's something that leaps out at me.
Yeah, and I think that's what I would have been thinking as well, right? So although Reimer's not an obvious choice because he's still full health, you're absolutely right. Pure Sabak is very difficult to predict because of his ability. It's difficult to a block on him, probably reduces you to only having one ship shooting him, which might be enough, but isn't perfect. And that block is going to be very difficult to predict. Fifth Brother's behind you, and you really can't get a decent shots on Fifth with any amount of ships. And so, yeah, I agree with you. I think despite the fact that Ranger Reimer is full, he is the ship that you can threaten. He's going to be in that corner, and you can get 4 of your arcs pointed that way. And the added benefit is that he then has to think twice about taking the target lock to fire his torp, because if he does that, then he's got no defensive token. So I think that is probably the best play. And then with the red one, you maybe K-turn, but actually maybe the thing to do is just a one bank and try and stay close and hope that Pure Sabak flies past you and the Fifth Brother bumps into you, and that's how you stay alive. From my point of view, the ability for the Ewing to turn 90 degrees and face towards the bottom of the board edge is worrying me here. I think that the 2-bank fits it just inside the Ewing if it was to stay still. And I think if he's rotated 180 degrees, that actually it might even fit and give me a shot into the Ewing, and that's perfect. Mm-hmm. But if he was to rotate downboard, Sunte then can't get out of that position. The boost and barrel roll don't necessarily get him out of arc, I don't think, depending on where the Z95s are. And what I don't want is Sunte fail suddenly blowing up.
It might be nice to just ram into the Ewing, right?
And that's what I decide to do. So I go with the 3-bank, thinking that if he is staying there, which I'm fairly sure he is, I get my focus from that, and I probably get a shot onto BSP1, the yellow Z95 there, who's going to be there or thereabouts somewhere in front of that. If he were to move, then it's obviously perfect, and I kind of fly in there, and I've got free rein, although I'm not expecting him to. And I think that is lower risk than sliding into the side and taking 4 dice at range 1 from that Ewing.
Oh, I don't like that.
Yeah, it feels like John is paying the price here for splitting his forces so much last turn. I was trying to work out a way of kind of getting shots on Sunte. So I think yellow has 2 or 3 turn to the right, and then depending on where you end up and what you think Sunte is doing, you either barrel left to block or stay where you are to block. And I think that's the only way you get shots there. Mm-hmm. And I don't love that either, but at this point you've kind of already committed to it, right? You committed to it last turn when you flew your Ewing out into that position. So you've kind of said, this is what I'm doing. I'm breaking this part of my list out to try and deal with Sunte. Okay, it didn't work last time. What's the plan now? If you just abandon this entire plan, you're giving Sunte complete free rein behind your list.
Yeah.
I think maybe you have to accept that though, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But for what value, right? What if you can kill Reimer in this turn, then it's probably worth it. But a Reimer with the ability to boost with afterburners suddenly actually is really tricksy, right? It's just assuming he's put a 3 turn in, which seems like almost the only logical thing to do.
Yeah, he has done that. I couldn't see for Reimer, I couldn't see any other move, right? He just wants now another good advanced proton torp for Reimer, and I'm almost too far ahead for John's
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's his move. So John self-bumping there with that blue Z95, which I think is a really nice play. Kind of keeps him back, keeps him in a difficult position, and then gets the K-turn in from red. hard turns yellow around, and that's fine. He's going to be facing towards Reimer, which is not ideal for me, but Suntir is going to get the shot at him. With Sabak, I wasn't sure what to do here, and sort of everything to me looked blockable. And again, my hope was that Jon wouldn't do what he's just done and wouldn't stay still. And so I've dialed in the sloop with Sabak, and my hope was that I could come straight forwards, sloop in behind his entire list and just be in a kind of unexpected position. But Jon actually covers that really nicely. And with the combination of that pink one, who is limiting my Aeron options, and with blue having stopped still, Sabak now doesn't have many places to go. Fifth sort of did something non-committal. He's in 2 arcs, and also because of Sabak, doesn't have that many options, because what he doesn't want to do is bump Sabak. So I decide here that the best option I've got is to barrel actually towards that K-turning Z95, take my focus, and then it's going to be 3 dice into 3 dice, and I probably don't take 2 damage at that point. And he's not taking any more fire, like maybe the U-wing, but again at range, and we'll hope it's all okay. But that was a sort of compromise based on the fact that I didn't want to create too many issues for Sabak.
Yeah, and it's fine margins, right? You have only 2 health, and it's the same number of modded red dice against the same number of modded green dice, but that's an acceptable risk in this situation, right? Like, it's still getting you out of another arc.
Yeah, and because my current plan with Sabak is now to Aeron to the right and then sloop, I'm slooping to the right, and so I was hoping to be in between these 2 central rocks facing back up towards the top of the board, but that is no longer an option, so I have to come out this way. And at least I've arc dodged, and I'm only sat in 1 arc there, so not a terrible position for Sabak to be in. So I'm relatively happy. Again, Reimer's coming round, and exactly as you say, with the combination of Beast and Barrel Roll into Link here, I actually think I managed to dodge all but 2 arcs. So compromises, and Fifth Brother kind of compromising his position to allow pure Sabak to not get himself into too much trouble. Didn't want to block the Aileron, and I certainly didn't want to block the sloop.
And of course, you could have made it easier for yourself by doing Sabak first.
Yeah, could have done, and probably should have done.
Having a plan and adjusting it and stopping and going, okay, this was the order they're happening in. Now that doesn't work. How does it change things?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. And had I done Sabak first, I probably would have had more options with the reposition. The other thing I thought about with Fifth was hard turning left, which obviously where things have ended up looks perfect. But I was worried about something being there and me getting blocked onto that small rock if I tried the 1 hard.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I had come to the same point that the 1 bank was probably the safest thing to do, and I think actually Jon did a really good job of threatening that.
Yeah, and then so Afterburner's boost in here from Reimer, barrel rolls to get out of 2 of those arcs, and then takes the target lock on that range 1 Z95. My thought is, again, focusing fire, right? So I know that Suntir is bumping into the U-wing. So I'm going to get 2 shots on the Z95, and I'm pretty likely to kill it. Whereas if I'd gone for the U-wing, I'm hoping for the kind of upper end of variance to kill that U-wing.
No, that's
and what I want to do is take a gun off the board so that Reimer is taking 3 less attack dice. For a moment, I think that clears. A bit worried.
That looked very fine,
and then thankfully it didn't, and then bumped back and it's all okay.
So you've actually got 3 shots on that guy, which is nice.
Yeah.
And actually, that block is perfect, right? Because it's giving you focus and predator.
That's it. So it blocks in a really nice position.
I do like what Jon's done, though, just going back to, like, okay, what is the strategy and committing to it? And this is something Lloyd has talked to me about. Like, we played a game recently, and I was playing a list where you have to accept that, like, they'll get behind you, and you're like, oh, but I can't let ships get behind me, and you get pulled apart. But he's like, he's going to get behind me. There's nothing I can do about it. Just go all in on a ship, you know?
Yeah, if your ships are less valuable, right? If you lose a Z95 but you take Reimer off the table, it's probably a good trade.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't feel good. You're like, okay, cool, I'll just do this. It's just like,
Well, yeah, absolutely. Like, plan 1 is don't let them get behind you, which is why we were talking about, K turning up and down a board edge and not coming through the rocks.
Yeah.
And then, if and when that falls apart, then be flexible and have a new plan, which I think Jon has actually done a pretty good job of here.
Yeah.
And we paused to see if Suntir one-shots a Z, which he does not by the looks of it. And so at this point, Reimer is still shooting the advanced proton torp in, right? Because a 1 health Zed, you just fire the torp and worry about reloading it later if you need to.
Yeah, I sort of took a moment, and I was always shooting the Z95. That was never in question, but I was considering whether the range 1 would be enough to keep the advanced proton torp. But I come out to the conclusion that it's a risk too much, right? The risk of leaving that 3 dice gun shooting at Reimer just to keep an advanced proton torp, and also an advanced proton torp on a ship that I'm actually pretty easily blockable next turn. So
yeah.
I wasn't, the kind of deciding factor was I wasn't convinced I was ever going to get to shoot the advanced proton torp. At this point, this is the second to last turn of the game, so it would have been, do I shoot it next turn? So I shoot the advanced proton torp. I think I end up with 3 hits.
And so this is the second to last turn, so time has already gone at this point, and you know that there are only 2 rounds left. Yeah.
So it's this one and one more. And so having the threat of the advanced proton torp for that last turn didn't seem worth the risk of not killing the Z95. So I've gone ahead and, as you can see, killed the Z95. Fifth Brother's not getting a shot, but Pure Sabak now, although unmodded, and has another shot. Shoots into Blue, who's taken the 1 shield already, and I'm hoping to get a few points further ahead, but only get the 1 hit. And I believe he rolls the evade, and it's all okay. But I'm pretty happy with that as a turn. They've got, 1 Blue who can shoot, I think, at Reimer or Sabak, but obviously can't shoot at both of them. Pink who's not shooting, and the Ewing is not shooting, and then Red with a not great shot into Fifth Brother, so it's all okay.
Now you just need to weather a little bit of a storm, right? And interesting, I think actually the Ewing shot here first.
Rolls hit crit into Reimer, who blanks out and takes a structural damage. So Reimer is now 1 off half with 1 agility. I'm lucky here, and Reimer is just out of arc of this Z95. So he shoots at Sabak, rolls double focus. So Sabak lives to fight another day. And then it's just the 1 shot into Fifth Brother, rolls 2 focus and spends it. And then Fifth Brother blanks out. and
all of his karma stolen by Sabak.
Yeah. And that's given me an enormous problem. Because where he was, had he lived, he's got the 1 hard next turn, just up towards where the Ewing is, where everything else is. He's got his homing missile.
Yep, absolutely.
And even if he were to die that turn, he likely does enough damage to something. I can either half point the Blue Z95, or I can put 2 damage into the Ewing, which if I can follow it up is probably enough to kill it. But without Fifth, and with Jon scoring those points, we're now at a situation where Jon's on 73, I'm on 120. Jon needs to kill another 2 halves of a ship, and it doesn't matter what it is. So if he kills Sabak, who's on 2 health, it does the 1 damage to the 1 agility Reimer, he wins the game. If he kills Reimer flat out, he wins the game. If he kills Suntir flat out, he wins the game. So I need to keep 2 of my 3 ships safe.
Or kill that red Z95.
Or kill the Z95. And actually, even halving the blue one is enough that I can afford to lose that half a ship. I still can't lose, get Sabak half and lose all of Reimer, but it would give me that kind of extra buffer.
I mean, that should be something to consider, because it puts you even further ahead and less likely to lose a ship, surely, if you're more aggressive.
Yeah, and it's a definite option. But I think about this term for quite some time, because Jon has the kind of easy decisions here, right? He just picks some ships and goes for them. And I've got to try and cover all possible options. And so in my mind, Reimer is halved. I cannot think of a position that I put him in where he doesn't take 1 damage. Any shot will half Reimer. So the game then becomes to keep Sabak safe, and he's a little bit healthier, but unfortunately doesn't have his Ada on, so can't react to where anything goes. What would you guys have done?
I'll let Ben go first.
No.
So let's talk through. So Jon doesn't have Leia this turn because he used it last turn, so that's worth noting first of all. So if Blue and Pink hate her, they're not going to have mods. So It's an option John has, but it now becomes less appealing because he's now relying on unmodded dice. He needs shots into everything or lots of shots into Reimer. So if you work it backwards, so my first instinct with Reimer is you 3-turn him left. Now he doesn't have afterburners anymore, and he only has a single agility. And it's very easy for John to just turn the Ewing to the right, cover that with a decent shot. So I think you want to make John guess, right? John, assuming that he's not going for Soontir for a second, because Soontir is the hardest thing to pin down and get shots on and get quality shots onto. If the Ewing is trying to get shots onto Reimer, he either needs to stay where he is or turn to the right, but he's probably not saying anything on his dial other than a stop. So now with Reimer, you can choose if you want which way you want to try and dodge the Ewing. So you've got a couple of options. You can 3-bank down towards the board edge, down towards the bottom of the board. Now, obviously, if the Zeds have K-turned, that opens you up to shots from them. If the Ewing has stayed where it is, it opens you up to shots to them, but you have the possibility to barrel roll left potentially and get range. Maybe not. It might come off a bit short. But John has to have played everything to get those shots on, and that means that Sabak is probably fairly safe. The alternative you can do is you can just 5 forward into the Ewing, take the biggest gun, have it no options of shooting at you if you just slam into it. And now he's relying on a bunch of Z95s, which may or may not have tokens to put enough damage in. I don't love that plan because of where the Zeds are. If he turns everything after Sabak, it's not enough points. So Sabak is actually in a position to get some damage instead. So I wonder whether I would be looking at one of the two things for Sabak. He can 1-bank to the left. If the Zeds have K-turned, he is probably not getting shots from them. Let's have a look. It's actually very close. He'd have the potential to barrel roll left and back, I think, and not get shots. Or he can 1-turn to the right and try and trade fire with red. And if he puts 2 damage into red, red dies. Now that's risky because you can't reposition and you can't mod, but it's unlikely that John has played for it. And then Reimer can just run for distance because John can't concentrate shots onto those.
Yeah, so my worry with the 1 hard from Sabak, and it is something that I considered, was that I think that a 1-bank left from the red Z95 isn't a bad move at all, almost no matter what happens.
Yeah.
So my worry was that although he's not playing for the 1 hard, he might just put his ship in a blocking position anyway. And then if blue were to 1-bank down towards Sabak, then I've sat Sabak at range 1 of a modded Z95, and he likely dies. And yes, as you've rightly explained, because I think a single shot into Reimer is enough to kill him, if I then get in the wrong place between that U-wing and the pink Z95, I then lose the game. So I'm an R about Sabak a lot. What I've decided with Reimer is to do the 2-bank left. And the reason for that is I think that it stops sort of on the corner of the U-wing.
So you can barrel one way or the other.
Absolutely. Then at least I take that 1 gun out. And if he's turned both of his Z95s towards Reimer, then there's a decent chance that Sabak survives and I'm okay. Soontir, I considered sort of trying to be a bit more aggressive and getting some points, but I couldn't see anywhere nice to put him that there wasn't a risk. And what I didn't want to do was get Reimer and Sabak safe and then bump Soontir right in front of the U-wing.
The easiest points for Soontir to get is to come down and try and kill red, right? But if blue and pink have K-turned and the U-wings decided to stay where it is, all of a sudden you're in 4 arcs and you can't take enough of those off the table.
Yeah. So we see here that red's come straight. I think threatening Reimer and Sabak if he goes quick. Not sure I love that position, although it does put his arcs sort of towards Reimer and also covers if Soontir is coming in, so not terrible. And then John decides, we'll see in a second here, to barrel roll, and then regrets that later on. And I think, it's easy to regret things in hindsight, but I think that there wasn't much that barrel was playing for. I think he suddenly got worried about Sabak having 1-banked in that direction. But I think it's one of those where you made the decision when you were setting dials and you probably need to stick by it.
Yeah.
They've got the K-turn from pink here, kind of just spreading a wide net to try and catch Sabak. I haven't dialed in the 1-bank right, and I'm really regretting it because at the moment it's perfect. It's bumping him out of everything's arc. And then blue is the one that decides to come up to threaten Reimer.
And so, Ben, quickly, do you turn the U-wing or do you keep it where it is? Or do something different, of course. You could just 1-bank it and try and block Reimer.
God. I think have to turn it, no? Like, Sabac's not enough?
Okay, so he's playing for a block.
Okay. So what does that give it? Like, so if Reimer bumps, he's not going to die.
Well, he's got 3 shots into him potentially, and he's also that gives the Ewing the shot into Sabak. So actually, John's done a good job here of
and the mod
giving him a chance of all the shots. Yeah, what I don't like is that barrel roll from the first one, absolutely.
And the barrel roll from the first one gives me the ability to do this. So I decided that kind of choosing violence was the best thing with Sabak. I decided that I couldn't possibly know where would be safe. So if I just move him to where the Z95s started the turn, they're not likely to be there to block him. And worst case scenario, I get bumped and I get a good 4 dice shot into something that might just shoot my way out of trouble. So that was the kind of thought process of that. Actually, as it is, it's worked out really nicely. I've got the barrel roll to the right here, which dodges all but Pink's arc. And what I'm doing at the moment is trying to work out if I can barrel roll in such a way that gets me out of the Ewing's arc, but still lets me get a shot, and how much of a risk I'm willing to take to get that. So obviously, staying in the Ewing's arc would be very bad.
Yeah, I feel like there's almost no upside without knowing what else is on your dials.
I agree with you that the Sabak shot is unlikely to be pivotal, but I felt confident enough with where the arcs were that I felt like I could get it without the risk. So I do go ahead here, and I think I barrel roll back and just sort of trust my eye that this is not in the arc of the Ewing. For anyone playing on Vassal, a small Vassal tip is that the arcs drawn by Vassal when you check arc are actually very slightly narrower than the ones drawn on the bases. So if you're looking along the line of the arc on the base and that is close, you've actually got a little bit more leeway than you think you do. And then Reimer goes ahead and does his 2 bank. So let's hit pause here. So Suntir currently has a hard 1 right dialed in. And he did that so that if the U-Wing stayed still, he'd bump the U-Wing and end up with a nice free shot. Didn't want to fly out in front of the U-Wing. But seeing as the U-Wing has moved, Suntir is turning out of the fight. Reimer has just moved and has an action available to him. What would you do?
I want to barrel roll left and forward is just my initial instinct. Gets me out of pink, gets away from red, so you're only being shot by blue, you won't die.
Yeah, Suntir can just take an evade. Whichever one blue shoots at isn't then shooting the other one, right? So there's limited downsides there.
Like, neither of those ships should get 1 shot by blue, which means you're fine.
Yeah, so I think if you do that, you've got blue shooting into Reimer.
Yeah,
I think he doesn't. There's no way he shoots Suntir, right? That's a super low percentage play.
So you're going to try and self-block Suntir here and be really smart.
Yeah, well.
Oh, I see. I mean,
so you're right though. So to talk through that would be a shot into Reimer, which likely halves him. I think you've got 2 modded dice into 1 agility. You need to do 1 damage. But the only other shot coming in that round is an unmodded pink into an unmodded Sabak at range 3, who needs to do 2 damage. And so to lose the game there, I need Reimer to take a damage, which is likely, but then I need Sabak to take 2, which is unlikely. And that is definitely the correct choice. But what I do, as Lloyd has
it's like we've played too many games together.
Yeah, and I
get going back, like, you've not chosen to be aggressive in any way, and I just wonder, like, I think it really was a choice to consider, like, trying to take one of these Zeds. Like,
definitely.
Like, on the back foot again, like, oh god, I hope this happens, you know.
Yeah, you're right, and I'm looking at just crossing my fingers and taking those shots, and I think the reason I didn't do it was I couldn't predict where any of Jon's shots were going to be with enough reliability.
Yeah.
And the risk of going super aggressive is that I just got it wrong, and so I felt like safety first. But now I want to shoot, right? And I take the barrel roll in, and that does 2 things. It blocks Suntir. Suntir gets bullseye on this U-Wing and his focus token. And I think I've got the shot from Sabak into the U-Wing. And then all of a sudden, I've got 7 dice into a 4 health U-Wing.
Right.
And if I kill that U-Wing, then it does not matter what happens to Ryan. I think the other thing for me is a bit of misjudgment, and I honestly can't remember now. But when I did the barrel, I don't think I was expecting to be in pink and red's range. I think that it's out of range. So for me, it's, well, I'm taking a shot from blue anyway. You know, the fact it's at range 1 rather than at range 2 doesn't really make a great deal of difference. It's still going to half me, and it still probably isn't going to kill me. But what I massively misjudge is the range from pink and red, and so I make the barrel roll, and end up sat in 3 arcs. And all of a sudden, it doesn't matter how unlikely it is for Sabak to die, because if he gets 4 damage into a 1 agility bomber, he wins the game. Unless I can hurt this Ewing enough. Sincere rolls 1 focus and re-rolls with Predator into a hit. And I decide not to spend the focus here because at this point, this gambit has just failed. And what I don't want is to give Jon the ability to fire red and pink and then blue have a nice finishing off shot on Sincere. Sabak does a little bit better. Unmodded gets hit crit, puts a crit through. Which I honestly can't even remember what it was. Kind of irrelevant at this point.
It is not the auto in the game crit. So
yeah, it's not quadruple damage. So had Sincere done a better job, we could be looking at a dead Ewing here, but that's not the case. So Ewing has nothing in arc, and here is
Sabak's barrel roll, nicely judged but poorly considered.
No, I think it was good. I think it was good barrel roll, right? Because he hadn't barrel rolled. What else does he do?
I didn't like the 3-4 either, but I liked one of the dials this time.
I would argue that the 3-4 was a sound to me. And I think the dials actually were fine. I think it was all fine apart from this barrel roll. And this is where I realised what I've done. And I realised that he's in arc of all 3 of these ships. And then I think I've lost the game. And so we see 1 hit coming in from the red and no evades from Reimer. So down to 3 hull is halved, 3 more damage, and I lose the game. Pink very sensibly deciding to shoot Reimer as well because it's doing 3 damage over 2 shots to a 1 agility ship rather than just trying to do 2 damage all at once. Yeah. So he also rolls focus hit and Reimer blanks out, takes another damage, is now on 2 hull, is taking a range 1 shot. This will be 3 dice, single modded into 1 agility. So the Z95 rolls 2 hits there and I've got hope.
Oh my.
And Reimer finally gets the evade. And I massively get away with it. And I thought this was a good game to put on the channel for that reason, that I think I played really nicely in the opening, got massively rewarded for it. And then just made a series of slightly suboptimal decisions. And I don't think, barring that last barrel roll, I made a horrible job of any given turn. But there was always one of the 4 ships that just wasn't really following the game plan of everything else.
I noticed this in my games as well. Like the amount of games I've seen where you're like 62 points up and I've taken nothing, I'm so far ahead, and just gradually stuff like claws back. I had this in a game of mine recently where I lost basically nothing to remove a ship. I'm so far ahead, and you start like, a bit of damage here, bit of damage there. So it's easy to sort of get drawn into this false sense of being really far ahead. That's not exactly what happened here, but something to watch out for when you do get ahead, right? Because for it to be like worrying about the final roll of the game.
Yeah, and it's ridiculous, right? I've got a list which probably is a stronger list, I think we can say. Jon, as we said at the start, was sort of intentionally taking swarms, and the Rebels don't have a particularly good swarm option at the moment. So I've gone in with a stronger list. I've got a really nice opening to the game. And I don't think I sort of really took my eye off the ball. I was concentrating and trying to win, but it was always it was almost like I ran out of energy after planning the 3rd ship every round, and the 4th one was a bit of an afterthought. And then that final barrel roll in was a bit of misjudgment of range, a bit of trying to be too clever, but mainly really taking my eye off the ball in terms of the win condition. So from my point of view, the learning points from this for me were that everything needs to be following the same plan. There's no point getting 3 ships safe and putting the 4th in trouble. And talking to Jon after the game, and kind of his main thoughts, I think, were about his opening and about the kind of timing of layer use and just those 2 ships that get out of sync slightly at the start.
I think it's a really good example of a match which really showcases that thing of like, what does this list do? Like, you give yourself some basic principles. Like, this list is about sticking together, guns on, stay out of the rocks, boom. Jon did that really well. There's a couple of moments where it didn't. Your list is about, you have these turns where you hit really hard, disengage. If you stick to that, it almost makes your decision making easy, right?
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point, right? And I can imagine that it's not something I do particularly. I think maybe subconsciously, but I haven't ever sat with a list and sort of what does this do? How does it do it? But I can imagine that helping, especially in the kind of later games of a tournament. If it's late into the day, having that default position of I hit and I run away, I hit and I run away, or I trundle slowly towards things, kind of having those heuristics, so it doesn't take so much mental energy to kind of work everything out fresh every game.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's the difference of this, right? When we do these games, we are sitting down, we're actively reviewing every single decision, every single thought that's gone into it, including often quite the list building phase and things like that. And it's very easy to play literally hundreds of games of X-Wing and not do that.
Yeah.
To actively stop and review and think things through, I think is really useful. And even if it's not on the channel, I think anyone who has an opportunity to record their games, even if they're just recording games, they're playing on their kitchen table with a family member, is useful to go back and review and out of the heat of the moment look at, these are the decisions I made, this is why I made them. Whether or not dice went my way or not, and the outcome was what I expected is kind of irrelevant in the review process, right? If you're putting yourself in a position to do the right things, you will get rewarded for it more often than not.
Yeah, and it's not difficult, right? The question you want to be asking yourself is why, and you just almost the more times you ask yourself that, the better. Every single choice in this game should have a reason behind it.
Yeah.
If you're taking a focus token, why did you take that focus token? The moves you pick, the actions you take, your target priority, your rock setup, there should be a reason for all of that, and then you can get better at making that decision and the reason being correct. But if there's no reason, then you've kind of fallen at the first hurdle. Right, and so I think with that, I'm going to say thanks to Lloyd and Ben for joining me.
Thank you.
And we'll see you again in 2 weeks. Thanks very much, everyone.
Cheers. Bye.